This presentation is on the Open Automation Software Total feature. It's used to sum up any Industry 4.0 data source. We're going to see how to enable the property and how the values can be reset either daily, monthly, or based upon event. To define the properties, we use the Configure OAS application and go to Configure Tags. Keep in mind you can also programmatically set up tag properties either with a .NET application or a REST API as well. Let's create a new tag that's a static value so it's going to be easy to track. We'll just call the tag name A. And with the value that we're going to sum up, we're going to keep it simple with a value of 1. And to enable the property, we just go at the bottom, we see enable total. We'll enable that functionality. And then we see additional properties that we can set. The sample rate determines how often the values will be summed up into the totals. The gain is a multiplier on the raw value before it is added to the total. So if you were calculating, say, gallons per hour or liters per hour, you would want to use a gain value appropriate with your sample rate to come up with that total in engineering units. So for example, if it was gallons per hour, you could do a sample rate of, say, 3,600 seconds or once per hour. That would give you gallons as a total, but the resolution would be very poor. So instead, what you'd want to do is specify a gain, which is 1 divided by 3,600. Notice you can also set the gain to come from another OAS tag value if you would like to. The initial value is when the total is first started, or any time that the total is reset, then this would be the value that it can start from. So let's say you wanted to do a countdown from a particular range of signal. So what you could do is put a negative gain factor and make the initial value, say, the target or the total that you want to start from. The total can also be reset based upon day, month, or based upon event, which would be a Boolean tag. If we enable this property, you would specify a Boolean tag. When it transitions from false to true, the total would be reset, and we'll see that the current totals and samples would be moved into the previous total values. The active property is the ability to pause the total, and this, if you use this property, you would commonly use a Boolean tag that when it's true, the totalization would be active, and when it's false, it would be paused. If you disable the total, it's going to reset the calculations, whereas the active leaves the total in place, but when it goes to false, it simply pauses the total. So let's apply changes, and then we can begin the totalization process. We don't actually see these values at the moment, so let's use a client application. We could use the total in a calculation. We could pass it back on to a controller using the data route feature. You could display it in a web interface or .NET application like WinForm or WPF. I'm going to use something simple with our OAS Excel connector. And we'll use the OAS Excel tag browser. So if we browse into that A tag, we'll see that we have a total variable from that tag. So we'll copy that to the clipboard, paste that in, and there we can see the current total of that tag. And let's also copy in the samples and the average. Now the average we see is just 1 because we have a static value of 1, and the number of totals divided by the number of samples is coming out to 1. Let's also grab the previous total from the total previous variable, previous samples, as well as the previous average. When we reset the tag, we'll see that these values will be shifted from the current total down into the previous total. So let's go back to the configure application and let's make some adjustments to the properties and see how it affects the total calculation. So one thing we can adjust easily is the sample rate. Let's say instead of every second, we say we want to update this every 5 seconds. Well, now we can see the computations of the results only update every 5 seconds. That's pretty simple. But now, let's say if we've offset that, we'd maybe want to multiply that by 5 as a total gain, so that as we're computing it, then the values come in that. So now we see the number of samples is only incrementing by 1, but the total is incrementing by 5, because we're multiplying that raw signal coming in by 5. It also could be a much lower value as well, say total gain of 0.01. And now the total that we have coming in is only multiplied by 0.01 on each sample. Let's reset this by a tag. So what I'll do is let me apply those changes. Let me create another tag called reset. And this will be a Boolean tag. Let's go back to the A tag. And in the property total reset by tag, we'll browse for that new tag called reset. And apply those changes. Let's set the sample rate back to 1, and total gain, we'll set that back to 1 as well, so that we can see some live updates more frequently here. And now if we go to the reset tag, this could be coming from a Modbus or OPC UA server, an Allen Bradley controller. So when the reset transitions from false to true, we're going to see the current totals shift to the previous totals. And now you see that the total itself has been reset. So that's the functionality of the reset function. It can also be enabled by day or month. And if you do this, this is the time in hours and minutes in the day at which it's going to reset. If you do it just monthly, then it's only going to occur on the first day of the month at this specific time. Let's control the active state of it, see how that works. So let's add a new Boolean tag called active. Yes, we want to apply those changes. That came from the reset tag. So we'll change this to a Boolean type as well. And back under the A tag, we'll make the active state come from that active tag. Okay, so the active state is currently false, so you see the updates of the totals has been stopped or paused. And now if we set this to true, it will begin totalizing again. So notice that doesn't reset the total, it just pauses it when it goes to false. If you want to set the initial value to something different than 0, let's say you wanted a to start an initial value of, say, 1,000. Then, when we trigger the reset, we will see that the total starts from that initial value itself. So it starts at 1,000 and begins counting up or summing up from there. So the data source of the tag which we're summing can be any of the data sources. It can be a calculation tag, it can be a Modbus tag. We can specify this to be a simulation. Let's just specify a simulation of a ramp tag, and then we'll see that that has that effect. If you want to persist the totals when the system is restarted, then go to Configure Options, and under the Retain Values tab, you want to enable the property Retain Totals. Specify a drive and directory along with the file name of which you want to save these files to, and then you can optionally specify a frequency to persist the file. The default is a frequency of 0, which means that the file will only be saved when the system is shut down or runtime is stopped. With the configuration, I mentioned you can programmatically set up these properties with the .NET application or REST API. You can also use a CSV import and export of the tags. So based upon group or the entire configuration, you can select CSV export. Then under the Value tab, you'll see a Total section. These are all of the properties that we just discussed that you can export to a CSV file, modify with Excel, and then re-import. And with any of your OS configurations, you do want to save your changes. So this feature is saved right within the tags. So under Configure Options is where your default tag file is going to be loaded from. If you have more questions or other inquiries about open automation software, visit our website at openautomationsoftware.com, and you can select Support, Contact Us, to send us an email, or call us by phone.